I love that so many women take the time to share their personal stories with me. Now, in this case, this is a granny's story. She's not here to tell her story. This woman sent me this message to my Instagram inbox saying, "Hey, Burb, I wanted to send my grandmother's story to you. She likely went through hell for years before she passed, and her stories is one of the main reasons I never want to get married or have children. She's been deceased for decades, but learning what she went through hurt my heart and opened my eyes. Is it okay if I send it to you?" And I'm like, "Yep. Let's hear what Granny's story was, because Granny didn't have the voice to share her story." She says, "I apologize for it being so long. I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. My grandmother has been deceased for over 30 years. I'm not yet 30 and never got to meet her, but everyone says she was an insanely smart woman. She spoke fluent French and conversational Spanish and worked as a court clerk. She was the oldest of 10 children and never met her father. My great grandfather legally adopted her and raised her like his own. She was, of course, a de facto parent to many of her siblings, and even when she moved out on her own, her siblings often came to visit her for long periods of time, months. I've been able to piece this information together throughout my teenage years. In a sit down interview with my father, I want to write my father's memoir, so we sat down for hours to talk about his life, and a lot of these details came out. She married a man, my grandfather, 15 years older than her. Keep that in your back pocket. This man is 15 years older than her. My grandfather already had 3 children from a previous marriage, and they hated my grandmother. She worked full time while they stayed in my grandparents' home. They didn't work at all and disrespected her. They, as in the kids. They frequently called her names. By extension, they hated my father and uncle too, my grandmother's children with my grandfather, and mistreated them often. She had to cook meals and clean up after these grown adults that made it clear that they hated her. She never complained. My grandfather was a truck driver and was gone for half the week every week. My grandfather was cheating on my grandmother while on his run every week. This was a loud secret for years, and my grandmother still tried to make things work. My father still believes that the mistress's son is my grandfather's son, even after my grandfather denied it. Admittedly, both my father and uncle were in the streets, so they probably weren't the easiest to deal with as teens. But my grandparents ran a tight ship when it came to my father and uncle, likely so that they wouldn't turn out like their older half siblings. And my uncle went into the military while my father went to college and then trade school. My grandmother loved her boys, and my father most remembers her helping them with homework, talking to them in French, and the way she and my aunts could command the attention and respect of the entire street without doing much at all. It was clear that she was loved and valued everywhere but in her own home. A relative on the maternal side of my family actually lives right next door to the house my father grew up in. It is a large house. I can't imagine cleaning it by myself, let alone cleaning around grown adults after a full day of work and needing to cook afterward. My grandmother died when my dad was 18, while my mother, also 18, was pregnant with my older brother. He was born about a week after she passed. I've never gotten a definitive answer on how she passed away because my father still gets emotional about it. To add insult to injury, my grandfather brought his mistress to the funeral. Who the F brings a date to their wife's funeral? My father was so upset about it that he and my grandfather got into a fist fight during which my father was stabbed by his father. Despite working as a truck driver, a job with nice pay, my grandfather did not buy a headstone for his recently deceased wife. My grandmother did not get a headstone until she had been deceased for about 20 years. This is the part. My grandfather died about 3 years ago. He was a deacon, played the piano at the church, and sang in the choir. I was even present for some kind of ceremony that the church planned to honor him. My grandfather was a stereotypical granddad. He worked on cars, even though he should have been sitting his butt down somewhere, drove his wife everywhere, a new woman, not the mistress, didn't let me pay for anything, loved watching Westerns, was sweet as pie, etc. My grandmother's side of the family also loved my grandfather and considered him part of their family until he died. He was very funny, and I'm happy that I had a good relationship with him. But I can't help but wonder about the kind of woman my grandmother would have grown into if she had a more supportive immediate family. So I wanted to hone in on this part. My grandfather died about 3 years ago. So he had a very full life, almost 3 decades after his wife passed, and she was already 15 years younger than him. So she must have died really young. Basically, she was used as a resource to cook and clean, take care of his ungrateful kids, and that probably drove her into an early grave to the point where he didn't even care. Like she wasn't even important enough to get a headstone from him. But after she died, he still gets to have a full life. And that is what's aggravating about this story to me, because he still gets to be seen as the wonderful man and granddad to all these kids, and they still have all of these memories. But he used and abused this woman. And I'm not saying abuse as in like punches or anything, but basically treated her like the help. I can't help but be angry that he was allowed to become a better person while she was left to die. I wonder often if her life could have been saved, if he would have been more attentive, if her husband hadn't been cheating on her and her stepchildren didn't make her life hell. What would have happened? I have only seen 2 pictures of her, and based on what my father said, only 2 photos of her exist. We made copies of those photos, of course, but I can't help but feel like my grandmother's life is being erased. As I said before, I am a writer, and I may shift my focus from my father's life to my grandmother's life. In the past several years, most of my grandmother's siblings have passed away. Many of the people that knew her are no longer around, so I'd like to find out as much about her as I can and find ways to honor her. Thanks for reading. Her story has been eating away at me lately, and the more of your videos I watch, the more I realize that stories like hers are still being told. There's an Alice Walker quote that I think you'd like. The life of the most ordinary woman you see on the street is frightening. I have to say, I find many of your videos triggering. Thank you for the trigger warnings, but I think they're so important, and hearing these stories is what keeps a lot of younger women like myself from letting history repeat. This type of message is the reason why I do what I do. Is also the reason why I want women to take pictures with by yourself, take pictures with your kids, take pictures during the holidays, during the family outings. Don't be the only one taking pictures. Take pictures with your family, because your family and even the ones that come later, like, down the line, need to see you. You need to be a part of your own story and not just a supporting cast member. We deserve more than that, and we deserve to have a bigger focus in our own stories, not just a headstoneless grave. That is sad, where your story is forgotten because the people around you didn't care enough about you to write your story, to tell your tale, to even see you as a human. Other people get to live because they are sucking the life force out of you. And I want us, the people that can hear these stories, to take these stories and do something different. Don't allow your life force to be zapped simply because you were born female. Just because you were born a girl, that is not enough reason to allow your life force to be zapped. We deserve much more than this. We deserve to be the main character in our own story and to tell our stories and show up, be loud, be in living color. So, if you have any stories that I need to tell, because our grannies deserve a voice and our aunties deserve a voice, our mamas deserve a voice, we deserve a voice, please let me know. Jump in my inbox. I'm Burb and Bougie on Instagram, on Reddit, all over the place. Let me know what you think about this. Don't forget to like, comment, and share, and take some photos.